You know, folks, I was a kid during the 1980s, and I've talked a whole lot about how growing up, my family always talked about politics. I was very tuned in at a young age. I can remember being 8 years old and talking about the Bush Dukakis. I'm not even going to do a take two. I'm just going to show you that a 44-year-old man can have gas too. The Bush Dukakis election. And I remember being very tuned in with politics at a young age, but you really didn't have to be. You really didn't have to be to know that Russia was the enemy. If you watched Rocky Four, you knew that Ivan Drago was the bad guy. If you grew up watching pro wrestling like old Brando did, then you knew that Ivan and Nikita Koloff were the bad guys, the Russian Bear and the Russian Nightmare. And you saw Nikolai Volkov and the Iron Sheik singing the Russian national anthem and spitting on the flag, and they were the heels. So even if you knew nothing about politics whatsoever, you knew that the Russians were the heels, that they were the bad guys. How far we have came from that. If I could go back in time and look ahead, like on some kind of time warp, and see 2024 and see fellow Americans praising a Russian leader and praising Russia and talking about how nice and wonderful their country and their cities are, as a little kid, I would have been shocked. I would have been completely shocked. And, you know, in all fairness, I mean, Ivan and Nikita Koloff would have been the baby faces. That's how ridiculous it is. We have Tucker Carlson goes over, interviews Putin, absolutely lays down and just lets Putin mock him and walk all over top of him, and then comes back and says, oh, it was fascinating. And then he says this about the city of Moscow. He said, what was very shocking, very disturbing, was the city of Moscow, where I'd never been. It was so much nicer than any city in my country, so much cleaner and prettier aesthetically, and architecture, its food, its service, than any city in the United States. I promise you that if a journalist had said that back when I was a kid, we probably wouldn't have seen him in this country again. That would have been the end of his political career or journalism career. It pretty much would have died in the water right there. And the WWF probably would have done an angle about it. And they would have that's probably the only place that he could have found work. Tucker probably could have been the manager for the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov. That's where we're at. And we have the frontrunner of the Republican Party, which, by the way, was the party of Reagan. We have the frontrunner of that party standing up and saying that he would let Russia do whatever the hell they wanted to our allies. Now, I've said from day one that Donald Trump has brought people into the political arena that knew nothing about politics, and I do believe that. I absolutely believe that he brought people into the conversation that just don't know how things truly work. But I also believe he brought people into the conversation that knows better, but they don't care. Because Donald Trump empowers them. And if he tells them, well, hey, you know, Russia's got it good, and we could have it like them and get rid of all them liberals, well, that's all he's got to say. And they'll go right for it. See, maybe I'm naive. And maybe I had this wrong my entire life. But I just always grew up believing that you could be a Democrat, you could be a Republican, you could have disagreements, and you were still Americans at the end of the day. And I thought that you could be a Democrat and be a Republican and have disagreements, but you would still agree on who our enemies really were. And you would still agree to come together when we have conflicts. Right after 9/11, that's the last time that I remember us coming together. And for just a small window of time, it felt like that it didn't matter if he was a Democrat or Republican for a very small window of time, but at least it happened. And I remember thinking, yeah, this is what we're about. And then along come the propaganda. Along come all the bullshit and just divided us and polarized us like never before. And then along comes a guy who empowers people's hatred so strongly, allows them to be exactly who they want to be, to the point that they will give him a pass for everything he said. He said himself that he could unalive somebody in the middle of the street and wouldn't lose a follower. I remember hearing that and thinking, yeah, he's probably right, but there was a part of me that held out hope that maybe, just maybe, he was wrong. And then he praises Russia, says he'd let them do whatever the hell they wanted to do to our allies, and they rolled with it. And they sit back and they talk about what a great journalist Tucker Carlson is. I never thought we'd be here. And to the people watching from other countries, I know you're paying attention. We're trying to pay attention here too. And there's a whole lot of us scratching our heads going, how in the hell did we ever end up here? I don't know. It truly boggles the mind. I don't know. You tell me, did he bring in people into the political arena that didn't know anything about it? Or did he just expose all the ones that never gave a damn to start with?